Welcome to Lesson 11 in our Python for Beginners series. In this lesson, you'll learn to use a new type of operator called a Boolean operator. A Boolean operator is used to join Boolean tests together to make larger expressions. So in this lesson, we'll recap what we've learned already about conditional structures and the use of Boolean expressions. We'll look at the three Boolean operators, which are the words and, or, and not. This is a short lesson. So to recap, a conditional structure begins with the word if, is followed by a Boolean expression or logical test that typically compares two values, and then a body, which is a series of indented commands, and these commands are only carried out if the Boolean expression in the header has the value true. And the if-else structure is very similar, but following the keyword else is a second set of commands, and they're carried out if the test is false. Now, what happens if we need to carry out more than one test? There's several ways to do this, and I'm going to look at one example in this lesson and another example in the next lesson. So here's an example. Supposing that you need to log on as an admin user of a network. You've got to enter a particular ID. That's got to be correct. And you've got to enter a password. That's got to be correct. You very often have to enter two values when you're logging into something. And only if you get them both right will you see the message correct ID and password. When we want to carry out more than one test, we can combine tests together to make a larger Boolean expression. So here's a program where we enter the user ID and the password, and the program evaluates whether the person has entered the correct password, the word Pluto, and if they have, it says correct password. Now we can expand that so that as well as checking that they've entered the correct password, we also check that they've entered the correct ID. And you can see what we've done. We've changed the first line of the conditional structure so that following the word if, there are two tests joined by the word and the total expression will only be true if the password is Pluto and the ID is admin. Otherwise, we'll move on to the else part of the structure and print out that the details are incorrect. So an expression with and is only true if the tests on either side of the and are both true. There are actually three Boolean operators, and, or, and not, and they're written in lowercase. And is used to join two Boolean expressions together, and the whole is true if both of the tests are true. Or is similarly used to join two tests together, and the whole is true if either of those two is true, or if both. It'll also count as true if they're both true. So one is true, the other is true, or they're both true. Any of those will mean that the whole expression is true. And not is a bit unusual. You just put not in front of a Boolean expression and it reverses the truth value. So any test that was true becomes false. So you'll see that and, or, and not work very much like the words and, or, and not in everyday English. That makes our programs a little bit easier to read. So here we have to enter the password, and if the password is Pluto in lowercase or Pluto in uppercase, then we'll say that they've entered the correct password, and if not, we'll say they've entered the incorrect password. So either of those can be right. We can actually increase the number of tests, and as long as at least one of the tests in that chain of tests is correct, then the whole thing will count as correct. You must include the full test on either side of the word or on either side of the word and. So if you're joining Boolean expressions using and or using or, then you have to give the full test. So this example that I've shown on the screen here is false. You wouldn't use that. So if password equals Pluto or Pluto, that wouldn't work. In fact, what the computer would do would be to take the word Pluto and evaluate it on its own as a Boolean expression. And if you remember, all strings count as true, apart from an empty string. So that would always be true. It would say that you'd got the password right, whatever you typed in, because a string on its own is always true. So that's about the most common error I come across in student programs. So if you're using a Boolean operator, make sure that you give the full test on either side of the operator. Here's an example with not. So if the password is not equivalent to Pluto, I could also have used the not equals symbol. So it's up to you how you want to structure your program. There's often more than one way of doing the same thing. Oh, and the exit function there will close the program. So if they don't enter the right password, the whole program shuts down. That's quite a useful thing to know as well. We can also combine Boolean operators in the same expression. So here we've got if ID is admin, so if they've entered the right ID but the wrong password, then print you must enter the admin password. So we've combined and not. So if they've entered the right admin and not the right password. In terms of precedence, the relational operators are evaluated before the Boolean operators. So the computer will test whether ID is equivalent to admin and whether password is equivalent to Pluto before it looks at the Boolean operators. I've included brackets because I think it makes it a little bit more readable, but actually if I'd left out the brackets it would work fine. And if there's more than one Boolean operator, the not will be carried out before the and. And if you're combining ands and ors, the and will be evaluated before the or. So here's some examples for you to have a go at, and this will test if you've really been paying attention to what we've been doing over the last 3 lessons. Write these 3 programs. One where the user inputs 3 numbers and then the numbers are output in order, largest, middle value, smallest value. Write a quiz question where the user enters a text answer and tell them if it's the right answer, whether they've entered it in upper or lowercase. And write a program where the user enters their day, month and year of birth, and it checks and tells them whether those are valid numbers. So for instance, 12 would be a valid month, 16 wouldn't be. And day can be numbers up to 31. If you're very clever, you could check for, like for instance, there is a 31st of May, but there isn't a 31st of June, for example. But, you know, do it as complicated as you can and see how you get on. If you're enjoying programming, then a challenge like that might keep you busy until the next lesson. So see you in the next lesson. Bye for now.